one. It is day, what day are we on? 9? Yeah. Day 9, so week 2, day 4. Forgot where we got to yesterday. Oh, Daisy and
They fell out.
yeah, they fell out. Oh, her name's just escaped me. Hazel. Daisy and Hazel just fell hell out. We'll find out what happens today. Unfortunately, it was impossible to ignore Daisy and her annoying ideas. By the time prayers were over, her seance story was all over the school. Miss Bell, everyone was telling each other, had not been kidnapped at all. She had been murdered. It was very strange hearing other people say it, and for some reason, it made me even more cross. It was our case, and Daisy had given it away to the rest of Deep Dean. The only way to show Daisy that she was going about the investigation the wrong way, though, was to concentrate on my own detective work. So after prayers, when I saw Miss Lappet and Miss Parker heading to the mistress's common room, I joined a line of second formers following Miss Hopkins. Miss Hopkins bounced along cheerfully and even patted a shrimp on the back. Once again, she seemed far too happy. But was I just being prejudiced against her? As I was wondering this, though, the one came striding round the corner in the other direction. He saw Miss Hopkins and his face turned a deep, shameful shade of red. Miss Hopkins stopped so quickly her hair bounced, and she made a funny shrill noise like someone killing a mouse. The second formers stared between the two of them in fascination, and I was fascinated too. Was this behaviour evidence of some guilty secret? Just then the bell for the beginning of lessons rang, and I ran for our form room. I bumped into Daisy just outside. "I follow Miss Tennyson to the mistress's louse," said Daisy coolly. "She's hidden in there, and of course I can't get in, but I can hear her crying. It's extremely suspicious." "Miss Hopkins is being suspicious too," I said. "She saw the one and she went all funny." Daisy, I could see, was not interested in the slightest. I spent the rest of the morning feeling as though I was trying to be in 20 places at once, shadowing one person, let alone 4, is an unexpectedly sweaty business. Between each lesson I went rushing about, trying to keep Miss Hopkins, the one, Miss Parker and Miss Lappet in sight at all times, and trying not to pant too heavily while I was doing it. Miss Hopkins continued to be enormously cheerful and to skip about school like a bouncy ball. As she did so, I became grimly sure that she must be doing it on purpose. She did not run into the one again all morning, but to me, the one meeting had proved enough. Miss Parker was far easier to follow, and I had to admit, much more obviously disturbed by something. She stalked about, scowling terribly and dragging her hands through her hair. Was she upset because of what happened on Monday evening? I was nearly certain that she must have at least argued with Miss Bell, or was there something more to it? Was she worried by the new rumours? Miss Lappet moved slowly, peering down at girls after she'd nearly tripped over them. Her hair didn't look as though she had brushed it that morning, and once again her cardigan was misbuttoned over her bosom. I realised that she had been showing signs of this sort of thing for days, ever since Tuesday, in fact. What was wrong with her? I knew she was doing the secretary for Miss Griffin, and Miss Bell usually did, but surely that extra work could not have been enough to tip her over the edge. At bum break, Miss Hopkins and Miss Lappet went to ground again in the mistress's common room. Miss Parker, though, swept straight past and on down the library corridor. I chased her small figure in its jumper and brown skirt as she wove between groups of girls and then hung back, just in time to see her climb the steps to the one's cubby door, knock on it and step inside. Here was something interesting. I edged through a crowd of second form shrimps, checked my wristwatch as though I was waiting for someone, sighed deeply and plumped down onto the top step. Staring ahead of me vaguely, I let my head lean backwards until it was resting as near as possible to the door hinge. For added camouflage, I pulled Swallows and Amazons out of my bag and opened it on my lap as though I was reading. Then I let my eyes unfocus from the text and listened with all my might to what was happening in the room behind me. The first thing I heard was the one. If it had been anyone else, I would have said he sounded angry. "Don't know why you think I have to do with this," he was saying. "I know you do," said Miss Parker, cutting across him. "She was angry, nearly raving. Joan told me. She said that you and she—" For a moment I wonder what someone called Joan could have to do with anything, and then I remembered that it was Miss Bell's first name. "I tell you you're wrong," the one did shout then, and I jumped and had to pretend I had cramp. "No," said Miss Parker, and her voice went much quieter so that I could barely hear her. "I know she went back to you, and I want you to admit it. You must give me—" There was a heavy thump. "I will give you nothing," shouted the one. "You have no right to ask. Get out of my office at once." "I shall," Miss Parker screamed back. "But you'll be sorry. I'll come back and—" "Oh!" Trying to look as interested in Swallows and Amazons as I could, I hurriedly bumped down the stairs. When Miss Parker shoved the door open a few seconds later, I was sitting innocently on the bottom step, engrossed in my book. I needn't have bothered. She pushed past without noticing me and stormed off down the corridor, nearly crashing into Miss Hopkins, who happened to be coming the other way, her hair bouncing more than ever. Was she coming to see the one? I hung back to see where she would go, and sure enough, she began to climb the steps to the one's cubby. Just then, though, the bell to end bun break rang. Cursing school bells, I stuffed Swallows and Amazons back into my bag and walked away. What did what I had just heard mean? Were Miss Hopkins and the one working together? Had Miss Parker discovered something awful about them? Was she planning to blackmail them now that she had heard the new rumours? Off I went to history, thinking that at last I had something really important to tell Daisy, something so good that even she could not ignore it. Chapter 8. I should have known that Daisy would find a way to foil me. She rushed into history when we were already standing up for Miss Lappet to come in. Good of you to grace us with your presence, Daisy, said Miss Lappet, who was looking just as flustered and misbuttoned as she had earlier. Also, I could tell from close to that she had a sickly after-dinner smell wafting from her. Next to me, Kitty mouthed to Beanie. Tippling again. Sorry, Miss Lappet, said Daisy, pretending to be contrite. It won't happen again, Miss Lappet. Miss Lappet? What, Daisy? Asked Miss Lappet and steadied herself with both hands on her desk. Miss Lappet, I was wondering if you were the one who went round collecting lost property on Monday evening. You see, I've lost my very special pen. Miss Lappet sighed windily. Enough, Daisy, she said. You do speak loudly sometimes. As it happens, that evening Miss Bell was in charge of confiscations and lost property. The whole form stiffened at the mention of Miss Bell's name. Not that she ever handed any in before she resigned. I was in Miss Griffin's office discussing important matters for the entire evening. Oh, said Daisy, flashing a private triumphant look at me. So, you were there the entire evening? Good grief, Daisy, snapped Miss Lappet, clutching her forehead. You never listen, do you? Yes, I was there the whole evening. And what does this have to do with your pen? So I thought to myself, that did for Miss Lappet. I had to admit that it was neat of Daisy to get her alibi like that, but afterwards it was no good me even attempting to send a note. Miss Lappet kept her eyes focused with a slight effort on Daisy through the entire lesson. I had no chance to let Daisy know about the argument I had overheard between Miss Parker and the one, and so when we went on to music, I was the only member of the Detective Society who knew that we had a new reason to watch him. It was a good thing I did. Wrinkling his handsome brow, the one barely managed to hold a tune on the piano, confused Kitty and Lavinia, forgot to set up prep, fell over a tambourine, and then wished us a good evening. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, even Beanie noticed that something was wrong. Perhaps he's in the morning for Miss Bell, she said on the way to the old wing entrance at lunchtime. Unfortunately, Miss Lappet happened to be passing by and she was still cross. Beanie, she snapped. Beanie froze in horror. Enough! If I hear you repeating any more foolish and baseless gossip, it'll be the whole third form in detention for all of next week. Am I clear? Yes, Miss Lappet, Beanie gulped. Sorry, Miss Lappet. We walked up to house very quietly in case we spread any more rumours by mistake, and Beanie stayed with us all the way. Yet again, I had no chance to talk to Daisy. In a way, no, this was a good thing. I was free to think about the one without any interruptions or contradictions. He had shown exactly the sort of behaviour that you might expect of someone who had just been blackmailed. The more I thought about it, the more I decided there was no other explanation for the row I had overheard. The one knew something about Miss Bell's murder. From what I had witnessed, it seemed likely that he and Miss Hopkins both knew something about it, and Miss Parker knew that they knew. But could the one really be a murderer? Perhaps he was just covering for Miss Hopkins' crime. Was that why she'd gone hurrying down to school on Monday night? So much for Daisy being sure Miss Hopkins was innocent. I felt quite triumphant about my deductions. At last it was me who had come up with the important clue, and Daisy who would have to follow along behind. But it was Daisy who cornered me. Come with me, she ordered as soon as we'd finished lunch. I've got the plan ready at last. Daisy, I have to tell you what I heard at bun break. I think Miss Parker is blackmailing the one. Honestly, I think he and Miss Hopkins... Shh, Daisy, Dawn. Shh, said Daisy, Dawn. The doorman was empty when we arrived. We made straight for my bed and sat down facing one another. Daisy, I said again, as soon as the door closed on us, you've got to listen. I think Miss Hopkins and the one are in it together. We know that he was down at the school and that she came back halfway through hockey practice. One of them could have done it. Or maybe it was both of them. And then Miss Parker found out somehow and now she's blackmailing them. Miss Parker went into the one study at bun break and I heard them arguing. Oh, Hazel, said Daisy. I could hardly believe it. She was dismissing me. How do you know she was blackmailing him? Did you actually hear her ask him for money? No, I said, but exactly. She's furious about his past with Miss Bell. We know that already. She must have gone to confront him about it again. Anyway, it hardly matters. I've got something much more important to show you. She dug about in the depths of her book bag and then pulled out a little glass bottle. She waved it at me, beaming as though I ought to be particularly impressed. I wasn't. I wanted to shout at her. She had to listen to me. What is it this time? I asked crossly. I-P-C-A-C? I-P-C-A-C? Don't know how to say that word. I got it from Alice Murgatroyd. Then, seeing my look, she said, oh, honestly, where did you get that from? Every nursery has it. Nanny used to make us take it whenever we'd eaten something we oughtn't. It makes you awfully sick. It's exactly what we need. I guess it's some kind of medicine. Mrs. Wren, do you know what this says? Or how to say it?
Well, I'd go Ipecac.
Ipecac. Some kind of medicine. I did not understand and I was not in the mood to try. I was still cross. Why was it Daisy's idiotic idea more important than my perfectly good clue? Don't you see? Asked Daisy, still chugging along on her own triumphant train of thought. If we're going to go hunting for clues about Miss Bell, we need to get into the school when we can snoop about without any of the mistresses or masters wondering what we're up to, and more importantly, without the murderer noticing us. That means at night, and the easiest way to do that is to get admitted to Sam. If we take this, we won't need to pretend at all. We'll be sick everywhere, and Minia will have to keep us in Sam overnight. Then all we need to do is wait until she falls asleep, and we can go wherever we like. But won't everywhere be locked? I objected. Not if I steal Jones's spare key, you chump, said Daisy. All right, I said. All right, I'll do it, but only if you explain why Miss Hopkins and the one aren't guilty of the murder. Because Miss Tennyson did it, of course, said Daisy. Oh, I haven't told you my finding from today yet, have I? No, I said furiously. No, you haven't. Well, she's an absolute wreck. She might as well be wandering the corridors muttering, oh, damn Spot. I think our seance rumour has spooked her. While I was following her, one of the big girls tapped her on the shoulder and she shrieked. But here's the more important bit. There I was, minding my own business in an opportune listening place on the library corridor when Miss Griffin came up to Miss Tennyson. Miss Tennyson, she said, I need to talk to you. You haven't quite finished helping with the little project of ours. You were so late to my office on Monday evening that we barely got a thing done. Yeah, but I made up for it on Tuesday and Wednesday, said Miss Tennyson nervously. Ah, but not quite, replied Miss Griffin. There's still a bit of work that needs to be finished. Honestly, Hazel, Miss Tennyson went as white as a sheet. She was shaking. Can we perhaps schedule another session? Asked Miss Griffin. There's just a little more work I would like you to do. Perhaps this evening? So what? I asked. Miss Tennyson and Miss Griffin are going to mark books together after school today. That doesn't have anything to do with the murder. Hazel, Daisy said, rolling her eyes. Sometimes you are a bit stupid. Miss Griffin had an appointment with Miss Tennyson on Monday night, but Miss Tennyson was late. Miss Tennyson takes English Society until 5:20, so the appointment must have been after that, for exactly the time when Miss Bell was being murdered. And I'm sure the way Miss Tennyson behaved when Miss Griffin mentioned Monday was a sign. Hazel, it's her guilty conscience. She must have done it. If you say so, I said. I was still annoyed. Here was Daisy again, sure that her idea was the important one. Oh, Hazel, don't be like that, said Daisy, butting her head against my shoulder and stared at me wide-eyed. Hazel, 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 Hazel. Ow, I said, sculling. I'm not smiling. Yes, you are, said Daisy, leaping up off the bed and grabbing hold of my arm. Come on. Let's go downstairs before Matron wonders where we've got to. Oh, and meet me in the cloakroom before French, and we'll take this disgusting stuff. She brandished the bottle of ipecac at me, stuffed it in her book bag, and galloped out of the door. So they're all friends again, but we'll see what happens when they take the medicine and see what else they find out. See you tomorrow.